Hello, my name's Jackson Ravens. I'm the Executive Director of the Washington State Democratic Party. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video about the 2012 Washington State Democratic Party Caucus and Convention cycle. Specifically, this video is about how you can be a delegate to the 2012 Democratic National Convention. The National Convention is taking place in Charlotte, North Carolina from Monday, September 3rd through Thursday, September 6th. Over the course of this video, I'm going to cover several different topics. We're going to start by taking a look at the 2008 Caucus and Convention cycle, and then at the 2012 Caucus and Convention cycle and what we expect to see. We'll take a closer look at 2012 and the timeline, showing some important dates that you need to be aware of if you're planning on running to be a national delegate. Something you might not know is that there are actually several different types of national delegate, not just one. And this is great because they provide you with several different opportunities to run as a national delegate. So if you don't make it for the first, there are a couple different chances to get elected. We'll then review the representation and inclusion goals for the Democratic Party, which are very important, and then talk about who can run, when and where to run, and finally, why you're running. This is potentially the most important part because it's how you're going to tell your story. When you get up in front of individuals that are electing national delegates, you need to have a compelling message to share with them so that you stand out from the crowd and are elected to join us in Charlotte, which would be fantastic. To understand the caucus and convention cycle, it's important to understand one of the fundamental parts of the party structure here in Washington State, and that's a precinct. Here's a map of a precinct in Shoreline, Washington, north of Seattle and a little bit to the west of the north end of Lake Washington, right around Hamlin Park. Precincts are basically neighborhoods, and they vary widely in size and they vary widely in number of residents, depending on where you live. And a precinct caucus is basically when the Democrats in a particular precinct get together and they determine who they think should be the nominee for president for the Democratic Party. Precincts are allocated a certain number of delegates based on Democratic performance, based on registered voters. So a precinct that's kind of sparsely populated and doesn't have strong Democratic performance might only have one or two delegates, whereas one with a lot of people that are strong Democrats might have upwards of 20 delegates. When these precinct caucuses get together and meet, the delegates are allocated, or apportioned, I should say, based on the support for each of the different candidates. So in 2008, in a precinct that might have had 20 delegates, some of the delegates might have been allocated to Obama, some to Clinton, and some to other candidates or to uncommitted. It's not a winner-take-all kind of scenario. Precinct caucuses also don't necessarily meet within the boundaries of that precinct. They often meet in what we call area caucuses, which is a place where several precinct caucuses can gather. Sometimes it's 2 or 3, and sometimes it's 15, 20 or more. And each of those precincts has a space within that building where they can get together and conduct their business. Area caucuses are often held in schools, churches, synagogues, community centers. Sometimes they're even held in restaurants. So, different places. So let's take a look at 2008. At the precinct caucuses in 2008, which were held in early February, Washington State had 245,000 attendees. This was a fantastic turnout. And actually, according to everything that we can tell, these were the largest presidential caucuses held in the history of the United States. They were also, according to the Obama campaign, the best-run caucuses of anywhere in the entire country. And this is a testament to the hard work and effort of a lot of volunteers and a lot of party leaders who committed hundreds, if not thousands of hours to making sure that the process ran smoothly. In 2012, we expect the turnout to be about a quarter of what it was in 2008. This is based on what we've been seeing in caucuses in other states earlier this year. The number of precincts is roughly about the same. We're going to have about 6,800 precincts. In 2008, it basically was about 37 attendees at each precinct caucus, and now we're expecting about 9. That's going to vary widely depending on what part of the state you live in. And the area caucuses, in 2008 we had about 610. 2012 we are planning on having about 400. Although our turnout's going to be a lot lower, we still need to make sure that we cover every part of the state, and also that the area caucuses are held in places that are convenient for people within each precinct, that they don't have to drive too far to get there. In 2008, the total number of precinct caucus delegates that were elected was 33,409. So of the 245,000 attendees, about 1 and a little over 7 was elected to be a precinct caucus delegate. In 2012, we are going to be electing 26,697 precinct caucus delegates. So with our 61,000 attendees, our estimate, that basically means that about 1 and a little over every 2 attendees is going to be elected as a delegate. So your chances of being elected a precinct caucus delegate are very high. Now there are a couple steps between precinct caucus delegate and national delegate, and I'll explain these in a few minutes. But at the end of that process, our delegation in 2008 was 110 people. It's 97 national delegates and 13 national alternates. Now our delegation in 2012 is a bit larger, and that's due to some changes in the rules, to our strong Democratic performance, to increase in population, our new congressional district. Several factors weigh in on that, but we're going to be electing 121 delegates and 9 alternates for a total delegation of 130. Let's take a look at some of the important dates and times in 2012. Now the next couple of slides, actually, I'm going to look at these in a couple of different ways, so don't be too worried about how they all fit together yet. It'll come clear as we go through this process. This is also a good time to point out that feel free to pause this video at any time to write down some information or to take some notes. I understand there's a lot of stuff that I'm going to be talking about here, but we can take our time. So the first tier in the process is the precinct caucuses, and they're taking place on Sunday, April 15th at 1 o'clock. Now the precinct caucuses are going to be held in the old precinct boundaries. So some of you might know that redistricting took place here at the beginning of this year, and they redrew the boundaries for the legislative districts and the congressional districts, and they're going to be redrawing the boundaries for the precincts as well. However, the process of redrawing the precincts takes a lot more time, and the county auditor's offices are not going to have those available until May. Generally around the entire state, not until May, hopefully. And so because of that, and because our precinct caucuses take place on April 15th, we need to use the old precinct caucus boundaries, those that were in existence at the end of 2011. Now the second tier of the process, there's 2 parts to it, are the legislative district caucuses and the county conventions. So as I said, the precinct caucuses were electing about 26,000 delegates, and those 26,000 delegates are going to be delegates to the next tier of the process, which are the legislative district caucuses and the county conventions. And these are taking place 2 weeks later on the weekend of Saturday, April 28th and 29th. Now, the legislative district caucuses, 2 things to remember. The legislative district caucuses are going to be meeting based on their new legislative district boundaries. That's the boundaries that were established by the redistricting commission and were approved, subsequently approved. And the counties have not changed as a result of redistricting, so they're going to remain the same. The other important thing to remember about the legislative district caucuses is that at these meetings they will be electing 1,400 delegates and 700 alternates to go to the third tier of the process. And that third tier has 2 parts, the Congressional District Caucuses and the State Convention. The CD caucuses are going to take place on Sunday, May 20th at a time to be determined, and the State Convention is going to be held from Friday, June 1st through Sunday, June 3rd in Seattle, Washington. Now, a couple important points here as well at this third tier. The CD caucuses are going to be electing some national delegates that will be going on to the convention. And the state convention will also be, on Sunday, June 3rd, will also be electing some delegates to go on to the national convention. The other point to remember is that the CD caucuses will be held in the new congressional district boundaries. That is on the boundaries based on 10 congressional districts that we have now that were recently approved. And the fourth tier of the process, of course, is the national convention, which the dates which I already mentioned. Now, if you are unsure of your precinct or legislative district or congressional district or county or any of that, you're not sure exactly where you're located, strongly recommend that you go to the Washington State Democrats website, and you can go to local party lookup, and there's a couple of interactive maps there that you can use to hone in on where you live and take a look at your legislative district. Your county will also tell you who your local party leaders are, and I encourage you to give them a call and just ask them about what the process is going to be in your area. I also encourage you to go to the state party website because, and this is especially true for the second level of the process, the LD caucuses and the county conventions, the times, dates, and locations of these might change a little bit. And so in order to make sure that you are going to the right place at the right time, you need to go to our website and just check. Sometimes legislative districts and counties hold their meetings jointly. So they might all be on the 28th or they might all be on the 29th. But in order to make sure that it works out for you, you should go to our website and check it out. Our website will also have a very useful tool called the Precinct Caucus Finder, which you will be able to enter some information and it will tell you where your precinct caucus is going to be held. It's a good time to pause the video and take a few notes. So let's take a look at this information in a different way, because if you're a visual learner like me, sometimes it's helpful to put it into visual context. So I put this chart together to explain the process a little bit easier, and you can see that it moves from the bottom to the top. With our precinct caucuses, they elect delegates and some alternates to go on to the second tier, the legislative district caucuses and the county conventions. The legislative district caucuses elect delegates and alternates that go to the third tier, the congressional district caucuses and the state convention. In that third tier, they will be electing our delegation. 121 delegates and 9 alternates. It's important to realize when looking at this chart that the caucus and convention cycle is not just about electing delegates and alternates to the national convention. There's a very important part of it here on the right side. And this is representative of probably the most important part of this whole cycle, which is involvement and participation. The Washington State Democratic Party at all levels really relies on the support and engagement of the grassroots. And if we hadn't had such a large turnout in 2008, if we hadn't done such a good job of pulling things together and making the caucuses happen, we wouldn't have done as well as we did when it came time for the election in November. We did great. So this right side of this chart represents one of the many ways that people can participate in the process. That's not just about electing delegates and alternates. It's through the process of resolutions and platforms. It's important for Democrats at all levels to feel comfortable about bringing their ideas, their enthusiasm, their energy, their creativity to the party in the form of resolutions, which are statements about how the party should act or what stances it should take. The resolutions that you bring to the precinct caucuses will be forwarded on to the county conventions. They will be discussed, reviewed, amended, compiled, and then those will be passed on to the state convention, where the process will continue. We'll also be developing a state party platform, which is a statement of our overall values, and that's also on our website if you want to take a look at the one we have now. In addition, we also have some archives of resolutions that the State Central Committee has passed. If you want to look at those, it's very interesting and useful. But this whole process on the right side is representative of an opportunity for you to come and make your voice heard in the process, and a part that we really value. So if you're coming to run as a national delegate, don't just think about that left side. Also think of ways that you can share your ideas and enthusiasm. We need that. It's vital. So let's take a closer look at the 121 delegates and 9 alternates that we're going to be sending to the National Convention. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, there are different types. And there are actually four different types of delegates and alternates. And it's important that you're kind of comfortable with describing and explaining these different types, because when you're talking to people that are going to be electing these different types of delegates, you need to be very clear about kind of what you're running for and why you're running for that spot. So the first group are 16 unpledged party leaders and elected officials. Now, I want to take a moment to say that in the next couple of slides, I'm going to go through and explain these four different types very clearly. But the first slide, I just kind of want to lay them out there so you kind of understand where we're going. So, unpledged party leaders and elected officials. Second group are 69 district-level delegates. These are elected at the Congressional District Caucuses on May 20th at that third tier of the process. The fourth group are 13 PLEOS, pledged party leaders and elected officials, which will be elected at the State Convention on Sunday, June 3rd. And the fourth group are 23 at-large delegates and 9 alternates, which will also be elected. They'll be elected after the PLEOS at the State Convention on Sunday, June 3rd. So our total numbers, 16, 69, 13, and 23. So our total delegation of, or total number of delegates of 121 will also be electing 9 alternates. So let's take a closer look at who these 16 unpledged party leaders and elected officials are. There are 4 different types. Members of the DNC who legally reside in the state. That's the state party chair and vice chair and some of the DNC members that the State Central Committee elected. All of Washington State's wonderful Democratic members of the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. There's 7 members there. Our fantastic Democratic governor is another automatic member of our delegation. And distinguished party leader, delegates who legally reside in the state. Former Democratic Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Tom Foley, who lives in eastern Washington, is also a member of our delegation. So that's 16. The next group are the 69 district-level delegates. These are elected on Sunday, May 20th by delegates elected at the legislative district caucuses. Now I'm going to explain that last part in the next slide, but let's take a look at this slide first. And you can see that on the far left I lay out the 10 new congressional districts that we have here in Washington. And you will see here on the far right the number of total delegates that each one of these congressional districts is going to be electing. They'll be electing 69. And you will notice here in the center the number of men and women that each one of these congressional districts is going to be electing. Now, you've probably got a couple questions looking at this slide if you haven't seen this table before. One, and I'll start on the right, is how come some congressional districts have fewer delegates and some have a greater number of delegates, like the 7th? And that is because the number of delegates is based on Democratic performance in 2008. So the 7th Congressional District had a real strong turnout for Democrats in 2008, and so they get more delegates. The second question you might have is how come some congressional districts have an imbalance between men and women? And there are a couple points to make here. One is that our entire delegation, the 130, will be equally split between men and women. That's the rules. Them's the rules. And we will make ways to adjust that number of men and women as we go through the process, but in the end there will be an equal number of men and women. That being said, in some congressional districts they've been allocated an odd number of delegates. So how do you determine where the balance goes? And it's a tricky system, but there's 2 parts to it. One is historical precedent, and I understand that redistricting has changed the congressional districts and they're not the districts they were before, but we still take a look at where the districts or how the allocation has been done historically, and in the past if one of these districts had an odd number of delegates, which way the split went between men and women, and we use that kind of as a basis. And we also had a little bit of coin tossing, random drawing to determine how the split was going to be. So there's no premeditated determination about how it's going to work out, but it's based on history and a little bit of random chance. Next group of Oh, actually, before we get to that, let's take a closer look at who elects these 69 district level delegates and alternates. This is a little bit of the inside background stuff that will really make your candidacy to be a national delegate that much stronger. Because you need to know who is electing these national delegates. So at the Congressional District Caucuses on May 20th, the people that are attending those meetings are the delegates that were elected at the Legislative District Caucuses on Saturday, April 28th. And you'll see here on this column that in each congressional district there is a certain number of delegates that were elected. The total number is 140. So in the first congressional district, there were 145 delegates elected at the different legislative district caucuses that exist within the first congressional district. And those delegates are going to show up on May 20th, and they're going to elect their share of those 69 district level delegates. And in the first congressional district, that's 3 men and 4 women. So the 145 electing 3 men, 4 women. So if you're going to run as a national delegate, it's important for you to get in touch with these people as early as possible. You can do that in a couple different ways. You can do that by attending your legislative district caucus meeting and, shaking some hands and getting to know them right as they are elected, right as they're running for those positions. And the other way is after they are elected, within a week or 10 days, some contact information will come available that you can use to reach out to these people by getting in touch with them and letting them know about your candidacy and why you're running to be a national delegate. It's also important to remember that there are some alternates that are being elected, 700 statewide. And if for some reason one of these delegates, or some of these delegates, are unable to attend their congressional district caucus on May 20th, that some of these alternates will very likely be taking their place. So it's important to you to also reach out to these people so that they know your story, and if they come to serve as a delegate at the congressional district caucus, or come to elect national delegates at the Congressional District Caucus, that they are aware of your story and will very potentially cast their vote for you. Let's take a look at the next group, the PLEOS, the Pledged Party Leaders and Elected Officials. So PLEOS, as it states in our delegate selection plan, are individuals, individuals shall be eligible for the pledged party leader and elected official delegate positions according to the following priority. Big city mayors and statewide elected officials to be given equal consideration, state legislative leaders, state legislators, and other state, county, and local elected officials and party leaders. This does not mean that there is some rank determination about who is going to be selected as PLEOS. This just means that these people are eligible to run as PLEOS. Okay? And the most important part of this for you could be for a couple different reasons. If you are one of any of these people, you can run as a PLEO, right? The important part here is this party leaders section down here, because what a lot of people don't realize is if you are a PCO, that's a precinct committee officer, which means you're the Democratic representative in your precinct, or if you are let's say a local party, legislative district or county treasurer or vice chair, or you represent you're an elected member of your local party organization, you are a party leader and subsequently can run as a PLEO. This provides you an opportunity to put your name in the hat one extra time for one of these spots. So I encourage you, if you fill one of these roles, to run as a PLEO. The people who elect PLEOs are going to be the members of the State Party Central Committee representing legislative districts. They'll be electing PLEOs on Sunday, June 3rd. Now, there are 49 legislative districts in Washington State, and the charter and bylaws of the State Central Committee state that each legislative district shall have 2 representatives, 1 man and 1 woman. So there's a potential of 98 voting members who will be electing these PLEOs. Those of you that are familiar with State Party Central Committee might be asking, well, what about the county members of the State Central Committee? Because each county also has 2 members that cast votes on the State Central Committee, 1 man and 1 woman. The reason that we're using legislative districts to cast these votes is that the rules from the DNC about how we select our national delegates are very specific, that the people casting these votes need to be based on population. And as you know, the counties in Washington, the population in each county varies widely. So unfortunately, they are ineligible to cast votes in this election. However, since legislative districts are based on population, these individuals can cast votes in this election. So this was a agreement that was made by both the legislative district state committee members and the county state committee members at one of our meetings last year. So it was not contentious. It was something that we agreed to do. So the next group are the 27 at-large delegates and 9 at-large alternates. These people are elected after the PLEOS on Sunday, June 3rd at the state convention. And they are also elected by that same group that elected the PLEOS, the members of the State Party Central Committee from legislative districts. Important couple of elements here. One is if you run as a PLEO and you don't make it, then you are automatically considered for one of these at-large positions, one of these at-large delegate positions, if you so choose to run. So if you're a PCO and you are not elected at your congressional district caucus, you come to the state convention and you can run as a PLEO. And if you don't make it as a PLEO, you are still eligible to run as an at-large delegate. Even better, if you are not selected as an at-large delegate, then you can be considered for an at-large alternate position, unless you don't want to be considered for that spot. But an alternate it's the same part of the delegation. You get to come to Charlotte. You're part of the team. You're part of the convention. You don't get to sign on the dotted line, but you get to participate in everything that our delegates do. Your credentials are a little bit different. You might kind of be up in the hall a little bit, not necessarily down on the floor, but we do everything we can to make sure that you have a great experience at the convention. So I strongly recommend that if you are not elected as a delegate and you still want to go to the national convention, that you stand to run as an alternate. Now, very important part of our delegate selection process are our representation and inclusion goals. I'm going to read this statement. The Democratic Party has a commitment to include historically underrepresented people in the party by virtue of race, ethnicity, age, sexual orientation, or disability. We encourage full participation by all in the delegate selection process and in all party affairs. And you will see here on the left the groups for representation and inclusion. And you'll see here on the right our numeric goals for our delegation. And these are just goals. I'm very proud to say that in 2008 we far exceeded our goals for representation and inclusion in our delegation. So these are things that you should think about when you're running. They are also things you should think about if you are a legislative district delegate and you are electing national delegates. You should think about when you're casting your votes. And also if you are a legislative district state committee member and when you are casting your votes on Sunday, June 3rd. Who can run for these positions? Now we get down to it. We've got some of the times and dates out. We got some of the vocabulary down about some of the different national delegates. So who gets to run for these positions as national delegate? Couple important points. This one is crucial because not a lot of people understand this, but it makes a huge difference. And it states that a person need not be a delegate at one caucus level to run for a delegate seat to the next caucus level. Very simply, you can step in at any point in the process and run to be a delegate. So, if you are unable to attend for any reason the precinct caucuses on April 15th, you can still go to your legislative district caucus and run as a delegate there. You can still go to your congressional district caucus and run as a delegate there, or to the state convention and run as an at-large delegate or alternate, or PLEO if you're eligible. You do not need to be, if you are elected, you do not need to be a delegate to the legislative district caucus to run for the next level, for any of the levels. So this is really useful if you are out of town, or you're sick, or you have to work, or something happens and you're unable to attend one of these steps, you can still go in and put your name on the list and run as a delegate. Very, very important. Second, a district level delegate and alternate candidate may run for election only within the district in which he or she is registered to vote. And registered to vote also includes 17-year-olds who will be eligible to vote on November 6th, 2012. And when we talk about the district here, we're talking about the congressional districts, and this is the new 10 congressional districts that we have. So you need to be registered to vote within that congressional district in order to run as a delegate in that district. Now, one of the things that we've done with our current delegate selection plan this year is that we do have day of registration. You also need to be registered to vote to participate in your precinct caucuses. So if you show up, if you're not sure if you're registered, or you know you're not registered, but you show up at your precinct caucus, or you show up at your legislative district caucus or congressional district caucus, they will have voter registration forms there that you can fill out to register to vote, and those forms will be put in the mail immediately, and we will consider you registered if you fill out that form at that time. Third, very important, you must fill out a statement of candidacy designating his or her presidential or uncommitted preference and a signed pledge of support for the presidential candidate with the state party no sooner than Monday, April 9th, 2012, and no later than Friday, May 4th or Friday, May 25th, 2012. So, statement of candidacy. It's a form that roughly is going to look like this. You can see it has some of your information up here about where you live, congressional, legislative, county. It says who you support, and then it has some of your personal information here. You need to sign and date it, and then it's got some optional information here for our representation and inclusion goals. Now, the reason that this needs to be done is that there is a rule about the presidential candidate right of review. It looks like I just skipped something there. That's important, but stay with me here for a second. The presidential candidate right of review. What that means is that the presidential candidate has the opportunity to take a look at the list of all the people that are interested in representing them as delegates to the National Convention. And because of this rule, we have to collect that list. We have to collect those names. You can't just show up and do it right away. You need to let us know a little bit ahead of time that you're interested in running for this position. Okay? So by filling out the statement of candidacy and turning it in on these two dates, we will put that list together and we will present it to the candidate and they can take a look at it. The reason we have a couple different dates here, one, Friday, May 4th gives us is the deadline if you want to run as an at-large, or sorry, if you want to run as a congressional district delegate. Okay, which those elections again happen on Sunday, May 20th. So by turning in your form by Friday, May 4th, that gives us some time to compile the list and to provide it for the presidential candidate's campaign so they can review it, and then to put together the ballots that are necessary to conduct those congressional district caucuses. The second one, Friday, May 25th, is the deadline for PLEOS and for at-large delegates. This date gives us about a week to compile the ballots that we're going to need for that meeting on June 3rd, and also gives us a chance for another presidential right of review. Okay, so it's in the rules. It's very important that you do the statement of candidacy, and I kind of played my cards a little early here on this PowerPoint, but if you have properly filled in your statement of candidacy but you are not elected as a delegate, you are permitted to seek an alternate position. Basically means that it just rolls over. You don't need to fill out a separate statement of candidacy to run as an alternate. When and where to run. This is a bit of a review, but this covers the four, I think, most important points that you need to be aware of if you're going to run as a national delegate. It's kind of a summary. And now that you understand a little bit of the timeline, you understand the logistics, you understand the flow and the vocabulary that we're using, hopefully this will, I'll kind of pull it all together in 4 quick points. One, you need to make sure you turn in your statement of candidacy. We just reviewed those. You have to get it. No, they're going to be available on Monday, April 9th, and you have to turn it in. Earlier the better. Just get it out of the way. Second, run to be elected as a delegate from your legislative district on Saturday, April 28th. You get to cast the vote for national delegate right there. It's an important spot, an important role to play, and you get to meet other folks. So do it. Be at that April 28th meeting. Run as a delegate. Third, run at the district level. Run at that meeting on May 20th. So that's your first chance to be elected as a national delegate. And then run to be as a PLEO or at large. Okay? Turn in your form. Get to be a legislative district delegate. Run as an at-large at your run as a district level at your congressional district caucus, and then run as a PLEO or at-large at the state convention. So those are kind of the 4 main points in summary of what we've talked about already. And to kind of add a little bit to that and to kind of lead us into the next discussion that we're going to have about the best way that you can campaign to be a national delegate, there's a couple other points to make. One is the rules state that each candidate may use up to 1 minute on his or her own behalf for nominating and seconding speeches, and a speech by the candidate. The 1 minute may be allocated at the candidate's discretion. So 1 minute, you're like, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to do everything in 1 minute? You're not supposed to do everything in 1 minute. That 1 minute should be the capstone to your campaign. You should be, as I talked about earlier, you've got about 140 people to convince for that congressional district spot. You need to get in touch with them as soon as possible. You should be campaigning from the very beginning so that you are talking to them several times. They're getting contacted by you. They're seeing your picture. They're seeing your name. They're hearing your story. They know why you're running. So that when that 1 minute comes and you get in front of that group of people, whether it's the people at the Congressional District Caucus or whether it's the people at the state convention, you get in front of those people and say, you know me. I know you. And I'm here to just remind you of the conversations that we've been having over the course of the last couple of weeks about why I'm running, about why I want to go to the national convention, about why I will do everything that I can to make sure that we are strong, not only at the national convention, but all the way through November. So that is, your 1 minute is kind of the encapsulation of your entire campaign. So don't be afraid of that. Use that as an opportunity to shine, is what I'm saying. But it's important to think about that, and that helps lead us into this next part. The second part, it's a little bit smaller, but it's kind of another little secret that exists. It's not that secret, but people miss it. Is that at each congressional district caucus on May 20th, the legislative district delegates that attend those meetings will also be electing one presidential elector and an alternate elector. And that means the presidential elector, you become part of the Electoral College, so that when the Democratic candidate wins the presidential race in November, on November 6th, that these electors, all the Democratic electors in the state of Washington, will gather in Olympia at the state capitol. There will be a ceremony, and they will sign the document casting their electoral votes for the Democratic candidate. It's a fantastic experience. So it's something that if you aren't necessarily wanting to go to Charlotte, but still wanting to participate and be part of the process, this is a great way to do that. So this is also something that if you run as a delegate and don't make it, and you don't necessarily want to go to the state convention, but you're still interested in playing a role, again, it kind of works out. You don't have to submit any type of form ahead of time to run as an alternate, to run as an elector. You can go to the Congressional District Caucus, and at that point in the meeting, they will ask for nominations, and you can place your name in nomination, and you can run. Good stuff. So the next part of the discussion is why. Telling your story. I'd like to give a big thank you to Michael Shadow, who is a communications consultant here in Washington State. He does phenomenal work, and the following 2 slides are based on some material that he's presented a couple of different times about how to tell your story. And it's incredibly useful stuff. I put his phone number and his email address on the bottom of this slide, but you can also look him up on the internet. It's got some very good information. So, telling your story. And I'm going to try to be as concise about this as I can. It's a big topic, but the first thing to remember is frames. And people's minds rely on frames, not facts. Frames are the mental structures that shape the way we see the world. That's a comment from a quote from George Lakoff. And the way that we know what our frames are or evoke new ones comes out of the language and what words we use. So frames basically set the stage for the story you're telling and help us connect to people. Facts don't necessarily do that as well. When you're telling the story, they serve other purposes or can be part of that story. So some of you who, if you have participated in the 2008 Caucus and Convention cycle, might remember the process of electing delegates at your precinct caucus or legislative district caucus or your congressional district caucus, and some of the speeches that you saw at that time. And people would get up and talk about themselves and tell their stories, and some people did okay and some people did a lot better. But there were many different ways that people did this, and some people got up and were very kind of like just kind of hit the bullet points. You know, my name is this, I grew up here, I did this, I went to school here, boom, 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 and this is why you should elect me as a delegate. And other people told a story from an experience in their life. And my experience with these speeches is that the people who are best able to shape their story and explain who they are and what they're doing there, what their vision is, were the ones that really stood out and stuck for me. It's also a lot easier to remember when you can frame your story in a way that connects to other people. So just for an example, if I wanted to talk about facts, I could say that, you know, I was born in the late 60s and my younger brother was born in the early 70s, and my mother raised us as a single parent. But if, you know, that's kind of some facts there. I could also, if I wanted to frame it a little differently, I could say, my mother has committed herself to sacrificing to family her whole life. And as a single parent in the early 1970s, raising two young sons in the South, it was not easy to overcome some discrimination in a variety of experiences that she faced. And already you can sense that I'm starting to frame the story around some words of fairness and about sacrifice, and those words resonate with people as I start to fill in the story in a much stronger way than just the facts of dates and locations. So the thing to remember is framing words, and I just used a couple of those in my brief example. These are some words that you can use when you're thinking about telling your story and about why you're running. These make good foundation words that really stick for you and words that will resonate with your people. And it's very important to remember that if you need to be very clear on the frame for any story that you tell. And if you don't frame the story, the other person will. They're going to fill in the holes and try to connect the pieces in their own way. And sometimes that might work in your favor and sometimes it might not. But the more that you are able to frame that story in your own way, the better that it's going to be for your presentation. So how do you do this? Well, you just need to say to yourself, this is a story about. And pick one of those words in the earlier slide. So in my example, I was thinking about, this is a story about family. This is a story about sacrifice. And starting with that, then you can start to build around that the narrative, which is an account of events of an event or events that are causally related. So you start, this is a story about family, it's a story about sacrifice. You know, my mother was a single parent in the South in the early 70s, raising two young sons, and at that time it was a tough period for single parents, especially for single women. Boom, 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 and you kind of build out on some of those foundation words that you're using, some of those framing words that you're using. You also need to think about how persuasive your story is going to be. And a persuasive story is any narrative account from your own experience, your imagination, a literary source, or oral tradition that will accomplish the goal of any of the 6 basic persuasive story types. So there's 6 types of stories. I encourage you to take a look at The Story Factor by Annette Simmons. Again, you can look that up online. I'm not going to go into too much detail on these 6 types, but again, you've got some words. You're putting together this narrative. You've got some framing words. You're putting together a narrative around this story and around these words. But you want to think about kind of the direction you're taking it. Are you talking about who you are? Are you talking about what has brought you to this space in terms of your run, in terms about your vision for what the future can be? Are you trying to share some ideas of teaching, of things that you want people to learn? Is this a process of putting your values into action, something that you're completely committed to and for? Or is it something that you feel really connects and resonates with the audience as a whole? The Affordable Health Care Act, the continuance of Social Security, things that people fear or hope or are afraid of, and you can touch those and share those kind of stories and that kind of framing with people. So there's some different elements to how you build out your story and in what direction you take your story. So you should seriously sit down for a few hours and process this material and get a couple starts. Write down, this is a story about, and pick your framing word and just kind of sketch out some details on how you would tell a story or a narrative about that particular frame. And think about how it fits into some of these 6 persuasive story types. So once you've kind of got that laid out, it's really important that you share it with others, some people that are close to you and maybe experience that story and can help you build on it a little bit. And then you need to, obviously the next part is your ability to present that story to a group, which is kind of tricky. I mean, sometimes it's fine to be sitting there by yourself and kind of writing some notes out and thinking about what you're going to do. But if you're talking to people, you really need to make sure that you don't forget about some cues. And there's visual cues and vocal cues and verbal cues. Some visual cues are eye contact, to make sure that you're looking at the group of people, that you move your head, and you've got some good posture, that you use gestures, and that you that you dress well, that you dress like you want to be represented, like you are, like you want to be elected as a national delegate. Vocal cues. Make sure that you use volumes. A lot of the meetings that you're going to be at will be mic'd, but at the same time you need to be close to that mic. Make sure people can hear you. You want to make sure that you enunciate your words. Use pauses. Pauses are very important, and resonance and tone. Verbal cues are some of the words that you might use, or examples, or metaphors, or phrases. So just think about how these kind of tie into your overall story. And I understand that this is a lot, and this is kind of the tricky part of the process, is how once you understand what the process is, thinking about how you're going to approach it makes it a little tougher. But and also remember, you might still be focused on that. Well, I've only got 1 minute to make this all happen. That 1 minute, again, is just the capstone. The story that you write, the framing that you use, the cues that you develop, you're going to use every time you meet, every time you talk to somebody, from the precinct caucuses all the way up through the process. If you go up to somebody and say, I want to run as a national delegate because because my story is about family and it's about sacrifice. Boom, boom, boom. And just kind of follow through. Make sure that you're looking them in the eye, making sure that they understand. And again, it doesn't have to be 10 minutes. Sometimes the best ones are short, but really fit a frame that people understand and can relate to. So let's review the whole process one last time. What we talked about in this video. We went through in the beginning, we talked about some of the timeline and some of the structure of the process, just to kind of bring you up to speed on what you can expect in the next couple of months. We talked about the different types of national delegates. Remember, there are congressional district delegates, congressional district delegates, there are unpledged party leaders, there are PLEOS, there are at-large delegates and alternates, and you have the opportunity to run for different positions within these groups. We talked about the representation and inclusion goals, which are very important. And then at the end, we really covered who could run, when and where to run as a review, and why you're running, kind of framing your story and telling your story. And that's all I've got for you today. I really appreciate the fact that you took the time to watch this video. I know that a lot of different people have gone to national conventions over the year, a lot of great people, and I really hope that you are one of them. If you have any questions at all about this process, don't hesitate to call the office or send myself or Party Affairs Coordinator Greg Hafner an email. We'd be happy to reply and give you some information. I also encourage you to go to the state party website, which can be really useful. A couple of closing comments. Two things, some questions that come up sometimes when people are asking about this process. One, the state party does not cover your expenses for the national convention, and it's not going to be cheap. I'm not going to lie to you. You're going to need to be able to afford a plane ticket to Charlotte and back, and then you're going to need to be able to cover your costs for the hotel room while you're there, and probably some food and a few minor things. We will be able to put together some transportation, at least on some buses that we have that will take you to the convention hall, and we will be putting together some breakfasts and some other events for you. But in terms of the larger expenses of transportation and housing, you're going to need to be able to cover those yourself. Now, what a lot of people have done in the past is they have gone back to their local party, their legislative district, their county, their congressional district, and they have talked to those people and said, listen, I'm going to be your national delegate. Is there any way we can work on doing a fundraiser to help me raise money to help pay for these costs? So you need to work with your local party there. Because remember, if you're a national delegate, you are a representative of your congressional district, of your state, that is going forward to represent all the Democrats in your area and your state in this historic moment. And, you know, as their representative, you know, it's okay for you to ask for their assistance in moving forward. At the same time, and this brings me to my second point, you have a responsibility as a national delegate that when you come back from the national convention and when you're getting ready for the national convention, that you expand your story, that you take that energy and enthusiasm that brought you to the national convention and the things that you learned at the national convention, and you take those back to your local party organization and you help them with their grassroots efforts to turn out people to register voters for the election in November. It's that kind of energy and enthusiasm, that kind of investment that you can give back is going to make a huge difference. And so I hope that over the course of this video that some of the points and comments that I've made have resonated with you, and that you are encouraged and inspired to run as a national delegate, and that you're working on your story already, you're framing your story, that you are ready to turn to people to help them support you in paying for this experience, but at the same time you are more than willing and excited about coming back and returning the contribution to the party and to the people. So thank you very much, and I wish you the best of luck.